Hello, welcome to the Sutliffian Report. Today, I'm going to be covering some stuff that I think should surprise everybody. Shariah is it hates critical thinking, and for that reason, I laugh a lot when I think about it. But let's get into a reading of God's word. I always want to start as this is a Christian news show and it's apologetics. I want to get into a reading of God's word first. So I'm going to throw an invite in the chat room to a few people first. And let's see. Again, you're welcome to join us if you're interested. And I just got to get the last. All right. Here we go. Yes, Leah, you laugh because you critically thought. Well, you'll see what I'm talking about, and it might make you laugh too. Some of it might make you cry, but let's get into reading God's word because sometimes this is what I love about God's word. God wants us to critically think. So the reading of God's word today, which I usually read 3, 4, 10, up to a good amount of verses. Today it's only one verse, Galatians 5:1. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. One of the interesting things about scripture is that it can surprise you. You can read it for years, and then the next time you read it, you sit back and you feel surprised that suddenly you get something that you never saw before. In keeping with Paul's theme here on the Galatians binding themselves back to the law, we learn from this passage that they are willingly placing themselves in binding sin. Now, this binding sin, I like this phrase. It's probably the best description of some things, and we'll get into that in a minute. This sin, according to Paul, is the marriage of the law and the work of Christ as of equal importance in our salvation. That's heresy. It's called the Judaizer heresy. And here's my, and this is where I'm getting at, or this slight change that I saw this time. This is what I wrote when I put it out. It says, on reading the passage, you may see what it struck me today. Christ has made us free and not be entangled again with the yoke of bondage. This struck me as not just having to do with the Judaizer heresy, it has to do with the full entanglement into binding sin. Another word for binding sin that gets substituted today, addiction. It's hard to experience life without losing friends and family to various addictions, to things like drugs, alcohol, pornography, whatever. I have friends struggling to free themselves from drugs who have been successful and then for some reason return to entangle themselves into that binding sin known as addiction. We each have those areas of our lives. Thank you for joining us. I'll put you in a minute. We each have those areas of our lives where we are more easily tempted to fall into sin. Paul's words here: stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free. It's a shout to the mountaintops of reasons to glorify God. The second part, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage to those who struggle with addiction. I say that word is not accurate. Addiction doesn't describe binding sin. See, binding sin tells you there's a way out. Addiction is an excuse. That word addiction says it provides an excuse to stay in. That's why my pastor's been talking about that, and reading this passage, it just kind of slapped me to the point where I really get it. I've been believing it. It's just, there it is. Keep thinking about that. Stand fast in the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free. Dear Lord Jesus, help me stand in your word. Help me to become stronger and bolder. Help us, Lord. Help each of us to become stronger and bolder in your word. Lord, help us to continue to mold us and change us from within. We're far from your finished product. Lord, please keep working on us. Mold us so that others see you and not us. Thank you, Jesus. In your name, amen. All right, let me get back so I can see everybody. Thank you for joining us, Darcy and Sharon.
Hi.
This is going to get interesting. Sorry, for those of you unaware, I just came back from the doctor. I fell on Sunday, and I thought I could easily order some physical therapy to try and get my leg back to where it's supposed to be, and I've lost range of motion in my right leg. It's restricted almost back to my original injury in my knee about 2018. And it's a little frustrating, but apparently I need to go for x-rays, and we'll see what else is next. So, yeah, you have to I say listen to your doctors, pay attention. I'm going to share the screen, and we'll get into this stuff, and at some point, oops, go back. Some point when I come back, I have to put in, I'll stop, and we're going to throw in the audio for this, but let me tell you, this actually is the part 8. I had I skipped a number of ways back, so this is labeled part 8A because I'm going to get that correct in the long run. But let me tell you, this reading today, I would like to have covered more, but I can't. Because some of this stuff, you sit here when you're reading Shariah, it's, I'm not going to say it's exciting. It can be incredibly boring. It can put you to sleep easily. Law does put you to sleep. But at the same time, some of it makes you laugh. We keep hearing that you have to throw your brain out if you're going to follow Islam. Well, we're trying to apply critical thinking to Islam, and sorry, we're not letting you throw your brain out.
Right. Well, it's
So,
pretty hard to.
sorry, what?
It's pretty hard to use your brain in Islam.
Well, that's what we're getting to. We've already said you can't learn philosophy, but the scholars learn philosophy. So it's, one rule for me and another for you. And we're getting, this is some of the insanity in here that is kind of laughable. But let me get into this beginning piece here.
Yeah.
I'm up.
Before you start,
Yeah, go ahead.
Leah said that link isn't working for her,
Okay, let me try it again.
and you chat.
Okay, let me put that in invite, copy. We'll try it one more time. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. All right, let's try it again. If you're looking for the StreamYard link, it is on the Sutliffian report. I'm just putting the link there because that's the place I'm familiar with a lot of people. And if anyone else wants an invite, send me a request. If you're on a different channel watching, we're on 8 different channels right now. If you're on another channel watching, send me a request. Let me know what channel you're on, and I will go there and send you the invite. Okay. Thank you. All right. This is going to get good. I started reading this part. We're in B 3.5, and you're going to see it's right there. It says on the right what we're going to be talking about. Little people got no reason to question. Little people. One of the things we have been talking about, and Lloyd de Jong keeps saying, is Islam is a Gnostic faith. Secret knowledge gets you to higher levels of heaven. Start thinking about that. Start thinking about royalty and how they express their belief they are special. They're God's chosen people to rule over everybody, and that doesn't mean they have to follow the same rules that you have to follow. Special rules for them, special rules for you. Different classes of people. Is that really, if you take a look at the Old Testament, do you see that? Because that's no place in Scripture. Special rules for one group versus another. So I want you to listen again. These are all laws, what we're reading. It says, as for the era of those who came after them. And I'm skipping down to the end of the parentheses. The scope of legal reasoning had expanded, and the Muslims of this time followed the same course as had the companions of the Prophet, except the legal efforts were represented by two main schools of thought, that of juridical opinion and that of hadith. The former in Iraq, the latter in Medina. Because of the methodological factors we've previously mentioned when we quoted the Khaldun, there were sometimes discussions and sharp disputes between leading representatives of the two schools. But this is the part that makes me write that part. Little people got no reason. But the ordinary people and learners, not the main, not at the main figure's level of understanding, were unconcerned with the disagreements and followed whomever they wanted of whomever was near to them without anyone censoring them for this. So you can be an average Muslim and you're unimportant. You don't matter to your God. You can be in error. It's okay. You don't matter. You can believe whatever you want. You don't matter. The ordinary people were again, they're unconcerned with disagreement within the scholars. Well, you can kind of get that point, but at the same time, it says whomever they and followed whomever they wanted or whomever was near to them. Be following the person that actually knows the scriptures, that actually can prove that they're vested in it, they understand things, rather than just anyone. Somebody claiming to be an authority doesn't make them an authority. And this is the stuff I sit here looking at. I go back up just a hair there. He talks about juridical opinion and the hadiths. If you go and read the hadiths, you'll be bored to tears because there's so many repetitions. You're just trying to read straight through Bukhari or Muslim or any of the hadiths. You sit there and you're going, this is incredibly repetitious. I mean, why would you? Yeah. Opinions. Now, I think this is somewhat humorous because they put opinion, they cited opinion before they cited hadith. And that kind of has me laughing also. What does that say? Can they use that word opinion before they used hadith? What does that say about hadiths? If an opinion is listed before hadiths, are hadiths less than opinions? Again, this is the law. This is Shariah. I mean, order should. I get that Allah is chronologically impaired, but humans definitely aren't, chronologically impaired. So you have to start thinking why something is placed first. And I sit there and these are little things, critical thinking things. Anybody else have any questions about this before I go on? All right, I'm gonna go on to this next piece. I didn't do a lot for this week because some of these things just made me pause and start wondering what the heck is going on. B 4.0, the rational evidence for following specialists. By Muhammad Booty said this. A third aspect is the obvious rational evidence, which we express in the words of Sheikh Abdullah Daraz, who says the logical proof is that assuming, and you know what we all say about assuming, that when you say you assume things, you make an ass out of you and me. Again, this is what they've written. A logical proof is that assuming that a person does not have the qualifications for his jihad when an instance of a particular religious ruling arises, he will either not worship by any means at all, which all concur is impermissible. What happens if you stop worshiping? Does anybody know? You are declared an apostate. Then what's supposed to happen? Off with your head. Oh, no, they missed that part right there. Let's try that again. Assuming the person doesn't have the qualifications, when instance a particular religious ruling arises, he'll either not worship by any means at all. Wait a minute. If you don't worship and they're going to cut your head off, ooh, why are they hiding some of these things? If he worships by means of something, it will either be by examining the proof that verifies the ruling. But if you're looking at how you verify things, you're talking about opinions. So opinions can verify things. Quran, which is really lacking in critical thinking skills and details, is supposed to verify something. We're going to get into some of that in a few minutes here. Let's keep going. The former is admissible because it would lead in respect to him and all others like him to in-depth examination of the evidence for all such instances, preoccupation with which would obviate the earning of livelihoods, disrupting trades and occupations, ruining the world by neglect of tillage and offspring. Tillage, again, when they use the word tillage in Islam, they're talking about having sex with their wives or their slaves. Tillage. In here, in the law, they're talking about having sex. Oh, it gets much worse. And we're going to have a few restricted shows probably to just because the topic is going to be nasty. But again, this is Sharia. They say it's about all aspects of life, so they have to have rulings on what's permissible and not permissible in regard to sexual activity. We'll get there someday. All right, we're into B5.0. This is going pretty quick. Muhammad Booty. Because scholars, this is the obligatoriness of the following's qualified scholarship. I'm just going to read his Booty's quote. Because scholars accept the evidence from Quran, Sunnah, and reason as complete and intersubstantive, that the ordinary person, learned one, is not the level of textual deduction, and ijtihad is not entitled but to follow a qualified mujtahid which is a scholar. A mujtahid is somebody who works at learning, who has comprehensive grasp of the evidence. They say that a formal legal opinion, a fatwa, this is where it's getting again. We hear a fatwa, we hear it as an expression of law. I think it's humorous that they're putting it in English that a fatwa is a legal opinion. They'll tell us it's law when they're out to kill somebody because someone has a fatwa against them. Let's think about that. How many people have died as a result of fatwas? I don't know that we can count them. There's still people out there have their lives endangered because of fatwas. Yes. Legal opinion. Do you think a legal opinion could get somebody killed? And this is the stuff I'm getting at. Sometimes what they translate is a problem. And Sharon, you are 100% correct. They don't want us to use reason. They don't want us to use logic, and they don't want us to use our brains. They keep talking about not using your brain, but they want you to follow someone that'll think for you. That's what this is saying. You got to follow that guy who knows more than you. In Christianity and Judaism, you and me, we're supposed to do the reading for ourselves. And the pastor gets up there, or your rabbi gets up there, and he says something that's not on target. Who's responsible for correcting the pastor? You, me, we're both responsible. All right? Because we're supposed to be studying. We're not supposed to let the pastor do the work for us. We're supposed to be doing the studying and keeping on target. That's how different Christianity is than Islam. This little bit, we're expected to do the studying ourselves. They're saying, let a scholar do the work for you. To me, this is incredibly dangerous. You can have somebody who can sit there and lie. I mean, we read from Galatians. Galatians talked about how somebody came along after Paul and started telling them, "Oh, you got to have, you got to get circumcised, you got to follow the law, and accept Jesus' sacrifice for your sin." Even Paul comes back and corrects him. That's wrong stuff. He's saying it's incorrect. He called himself a scholar. But the people, I guess, this is why the Bereans are important. The Bereans, the Bereans searched the scriptures to find out what was right. Be a Berean. All right, let me just go back here. This is where I start to have some humor. They say that a formal legal opinion from Mujtahid is in relation to the ordinary person, just as a proof from the Quran. So, what I'm trying to say here is, an ordinary person has to follow a fatwa. But if you're not an ordinary person, you're a scholar or something like that. Do you really have? It's like saying there's two different levels of obedience. Again, this is Gnosticism. It's problematic. For the Quran, just as it obligates the scholars through verses to hold its evidences and proofs, and it obligates the uninformed person to adhere to the formal legal opinion of the scholar and his ijtihad, which is basically work. Okay, think about this. So the obvious person, the common person, has to do whatever the scholar says. Do they get a say? Are they allowed an opinion? No. And this is why critical thinking is so dangerous to Sharia and Islam as a whole. If you follow critical thinking, you'd be tearing this apart left and right. I will say this again, this is boring crap. But a person who uses critical thinking will tear this up. This is the reason I'm going slowly through it. You are supposed to use your brain. God gave you a brain. Use it. Find out the errors. Ask questions. You don't ask questions, you're not using the brain God gave you. All right, let's go on. All right, so we're almost done, believe it or not, because this is not an in-depth piece this week, because I sat here going through this and I just cannot believe some of the things I read. Here we go. Why qualified scholars differ on legal questions. B 6.1. This is from Maduhdin. Muslims of the Sunnah and community are in agreement that we have arrived, after all the rulings of sacred law, through evidence that is either unquestionably established transmission or probabilistically established transmission. The surahs of the Quran, in all of its verses, and those hadiths which have reached us by so many channels of transmission, that belief in them is obligatory. You know, there is a part where I accept this and a part where I don't. Okay, they're not talking about the Quran has to be accepted wholly. Now, listen to what I'm saying. Above, they had talked about transmissions. These are specific to how something is learned that is either in the Quran or in the Hadiths. They haven't said, if you're paying them real close attention here, they have not said they are not talking about the Quran, which brings a lot of questions here. Why did they mention the sacred law and unquestionable established transmission and probabilistically established transmissions, and then mention the Quran? If they were only going to talk about the Quran, about the Hadiths, which is usually what this is in respect to, why did they mention the Quran? Is the Quran not written, not the word of Allah? Was it not written supposedly by Muhammad? If it wasn't, that's why this is said. So is the Quran is Sharia now tearing up the original claim that Muhammad wrote? That Muhammad did he had these surahs. Are they tearing it up? Because now it's saying, the way I read this, and I'm just telling everybody else, tell me if you're seeing the same thing. This is why critical thinking is important. Muslims of the Sunni community, it says, are in agreement that we have arrived at the rulings of sacred law through evidence that is either unquestionably established transmission or probabilistically established transmission. And the next thing they mention is the surahs of the Quran. Is anybody now questioning whether the surahs of the Quran were written down at a much later time than is claimed? Because this transmission we're talking about, I mean, this pretty much tells us there was no written Quran during the time of Muhammad. No, nothing written down during the time of Abu Bakr is what would be the claim here. Because if you're talking about transmissions, Abu Bakr was there. That's first generation. If we're talking about transmission, we're talking about generations. So are we talking about during the time of Umar or later? This is something, I mean, Muslims have to ask these questions themselves. Why? Again, this is their Sharia. I mean, one of the things I owe Dr. Lloyd DeJong a great service for is he kept nailing it to me when we were having this conversation. He says Sharia is the end of Islam. The problem is getting a Muslim to ask these questions. Why did they mention the surahs if the Quran was given by Muhammad and Allah? How long? Unquestionably established transmission. How long did it take to get to create the Quran? Are we talking 100 years after? 200 years? Are you starting to think about this? I hope you are. Because it implies, I mean, that's quite a statement there. Now,
Can I ask you a question?
yes, please.
It's probably a dumb question, but if we're the ones transmitting to them their hadith and their surahs, are they obligated to listen? I'm sorry.
Well, that's kind of the humor in here, and we're actually forbidden from doing what we're doing.
Okay, yeah,
So,
that I know. Yeah. Okay.
because we're doing this, because they're not willing to ask these questions, they're told they can't think. I'm hoping one of the Muslims actually that's out there will use their brain and consider for themselves whether what we're saying is true or false. If I mean, you're asking a really good question. Do they have an obligation to give us an answer? And the answer they would be obligated to give us would be most likely a lie in support of Islam. Because little later on, when we get into Sharia, there is a whole section on permissible lying. And that permissible lying is anything to support Islam,
Okay.
protect
Okay.
Islam.
Yeah. Because I've
And
never gotten a straight answer from a Muslim. Uh, never. I have never gotten a straight answer.
I don't get straight answers from liberals either. So
Oh, yeah. Me either. Yeah.
it's kind of like they have the same mindset, which is why I think they get along so well. All right, let me go a little farther. In the surahs of the Quran, all its verses, and the hadiths, which have reached us by so many channels of transmission. Again, they mention the, the surahs of the Quran with us. That belief in them is obligatory. So here's another issue I have with this. I have met many Muslims who say that, okay, I don't accept that hadith. I don't accept, we got this guy named Kenny something. We won't mention his last name. And he doesn't accept the things, the hadiths that say Aisha was 6 years old when she got married. Because that would make his prophet a pervert. And Kenny doesn't like perverts. He said it. He said it himself. You know, you have to be a pervert to marry someone at the age of 6 and better at the age of 9. He's basically come out. I mean, it's not word for word for him, but it is darn close. He's okay. I mean, those are the things you have to think about. My issue here, again, if this is obligatory that you accept them without question, have you just said it's against your belief structure to ask questions, which is what critical thinking is based on? In education, we talked about this. Eric mentioned it last week. I talked about it, and I'm going to talk about it until the end of this series. How important asking questions is. If we don't ask questions, you can't find an answer. I always tell my students when I'm teaching, whatever I'm teaching, that if you don't ask questions, you can't learn. I mean, most classrooms, you'll hear teachers say there's no such thing as a stupid question, because usually when I'm out teaching adults and someone raises their hand and says, "I have a question," I'll bet you there is at least 5 other adults in that room that have the exact same question, because you'll see the expressions on their face when something gets answered. You think that doesn't happen in an average classroom with children? It does over and over and over again. That's why we say there's no such thing as stupid questions. Now, when you ask the same question 5 times and the rest of the room is tired with you, then we might get into the realm of stupid questions. But yeah, I have serious issues with the idea of saying you must accept these things unquestionably. Since it is saying belief in them is obligatory, you can't be a follower of Islam unless you accept the surahs of the Quran, the hadiths, and then, but they've already provided question. I mean, if you're reading this and you're using critical thinking questions, they have just provided questions on why they should be accepted or not accepted. And they don't even know they did it, which is, to me, quite humorous. Was this? It's like they think here's my other issue with this. You see all these big words? They're not in Arabic. I'm hoping that when I go back to go over this, and when I start to turn all these shows into a book, that I'll have the translation of these passages, because what I've learned is these big word passages, they're made up. That they're all just imaginary phrases that just sound legalistic. They do not exist in Islam, in Sharia. All right, let's keep going here. We're down to it. I'm just going to skip down to the yellow passage. It is impossible that the various channels could all have been conspired to fabricate them. Now, fabricate them. This is where it gets really important. That means that transmission happened with the Quran. That transmission happened with the Hadith. Again, it's their words. So the claim that everything was written down, I mean, this is all about oral transmission, people. Understand that. Oral transmission. This is what this is about. Unquestionably established transmission, probabilistic established transmission. These are talking about oral transmission, not written and copied down things. There's a huge difference there. All right, let me get on to this next part. Okay, I got to close this up for just a second and come back so I can get the sound in. And present. And here we go. Now we have the top 10 Quran things.
Hello, everyone. Last year I made a video called The Top 10 Things the Bible Forbids Besides Homosexuality, where we covered some sexist and downright violent messages all within this book. However, the Bible isn't the only book out there with some questionable things in it. So, in this video, we're counting down the top 10 controversial Quran verses. Number 10. Dismemberment. If I was ever caught stealing something, I think I'd take prison over this. Verse 538 states, "As for the thief, both male and female cut off their hands." A pretty extreme punishment, don't you think? I mean, imagine if it was a child stealing candy. Should they have their hands cut off too? Also, if a thing like your car or money is taken, that can be returned or replaced. However, if your hands are taken, those are gone forever. How can a thief rehabilitate and change their ways then? Regardless of what I think though, some Muslims out there still practice this verse. Number 9. Women are ignorant. This part of the Quran is about witness testimony. It says that if there are not 2 men available to witness, then it should be a man and 2 women. Why 2 and not 1? The main reason is that in case one of them forgets something, the other can remind her, implying that females are naturally forgetful. So, according to the Quran, men are more intelligent than women. Number 8. Women deserve less. Not only are women less intelligent in the Quran, they deserve less too. Verse 411 says that males inherit what is equal to the share of 2 females. So while the men get to relish in the majority of the money, the women only receive half as much. If it isn't obvious enough yet, gender equality is not popular in Islam. Number 7. Incest. Have you ever had the desire to get with your cousin? Well, if you follow the Quran, you're in luck. Verse 3350 states that the daughters of your aunts and uncles are lawful to you. And as you probably know, having offspring with your relatives can have some harmful consequences.
The link between cousin marriage and genetic illness has been known for years. British Pakistanis are 13 times more likely to have children with recessive disorders than the general population. They account for just over 3% of all births, but have almost a third of all British children with recessive genetic disorders. Here in Birmingham, 1 in 10 of all children born to married first cousins from within the city's large Pakistani community either die in infancy or go on to develop serious disability as a result of recessive genetic disorders.
Mohsin has a rare genetic disease which is gradually destroying his body. He was born with it because his mother and father are first cousins.
Cousin marriages have been going on for generations, and as a result, many children are paying the price. Number 6. Slavery. Was getting with your cousin too hard for you? Don't worry, there's still hope. Verse 424 says that prohibited to you are all married women, except those your right hands possess. In case you don't know, the phrase what your right hands possess refers to slaves.
الحرة والحرة لازم بعقد زواج وهذا الجارية لا فقط يشتريها وخلاص كأنه يعني تزوجها.
Now, you might be asking yourself, wouldn't sex with a slave girl be rape? Yeah, it would be. Number 5. Pedophilia. This part of the Quran prescribes a waiting period for remarriage. Verse 65:4 states, "As for your women who have despaired of further menstruating, if you were in doubt, then their waiting period is 3 months, as well as those who have not yet menstruated." Not yet menstruated? Wouldn't that mean that
حتى يمكن أن يعقد على فتاة عمرها سنة زمان مش 9 سنين ولا 7 سنين ولا 8 سنين.
Oh, child marriages are quite common in countries like Yemen, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and more. Heck, even the Prophet Muhammad married a 6-year-old girl named Aisha, and they consummated their marriage, aka had sex, when she was 9. People in Yemen have tried setting a minimum age for marriage, but sadly, everything they've tried has been overturned. Number 4. Domestic abuse. Is your wife misbehaving? Maybe she forgot to make dinner on time or iron your shirt. If so, the Quran has the perfect solution for you. Verse 434 says that good women are obedient to men, and if the man really fears that she'll be defiant, he is entitled to beat her. So guys, if your girl's acting up, all you have to do is... Number 3. Polytheism. If any of you watching this video believe in more than one god, I'd recommend keeping it to yourself. Verse 9:5, aka the verse of the sword, commands Muslims to kill polytheists wherever they find them. However, they can go on their way as long as they repent their beliefs. You know, It kind of reminds me of
The Inquisition. What a show, the Inquisition. Here we go.
because of verses like this one, polytheistic religions like the Hindus have been oppressed for centuries. Number 2, apostasy.
What is the penalty for apostasy? What do you teach the children will happen to them if they give up the Muslim faith?
Well, let's bring the debate back into Britain.
What is the penalty for apostasy?
Verse 489 says that if people turn away from Islam, then seize them and kill them wherever you find them.
The consensus of all scholars that if a person changes his religion from Islam to any other religion, the punishment should be execution, death.
If it's an Islamic country, then the Sharia is very clear. Apostasy is dealt with the death penalty.
Thank you.
Not only that, but there are numerous other verses in the Quran that all imply death for leaving the faith, which is why many Muslims are terrified of leaving Islam.
لم يتركوا الردة، لو تركوا الردة ما كان هناك إسلام، كان انتهى الإسلام منذ وفاة الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام، فالوقوف أمام الردة هو الذي أبقى الإسلام.
And finally, number 1, world domination. This may be one of the most terrifying messages in the Quran. Verse 929 orders Muslims to fight those who do not believe in Allah until they pay the tax and submit to Islam.
بقي أن يقود هذه الأرض الإسلام، والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أخبر بهذا، بشر بهذا بوضوح في عدد من أحاديثه صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. فالقيادة الإسلامية قادمة، شاء من شاء وأبى من أبى، فلذلك ينبغي أن نكون نحن جنودا لهذه القيادة القادمة.
This man, Amjad Chowdhury, is their leader. He demands Islamic law, known as Shariah, to be the law of the land. Chowdhury's strategy is to pit Muslims against everyone else to create tension.
If you've ever wondered why terrorist groups like ISIS feel it's their duty to attack non-Muslims, verses like this one are the reason why. Now, to clarify, I'm well aware that not all Muslims follow these verses, and I've met Muslims who are warm, friendly people. However, the truth is that the Quran has many dangerous and hateful messages in it, and we have the right to criticize those messages. Islam is far from being the religion of peace. My name's Nathan, and I'll see you next time.
Isn't this reason to use your critical thinking skills? I mean, that's what I'm getting at. It's time for critical thinking. Hold on a second. I got to get out of this mode here. All right. Hello. All right. Critical thinking is all important. You have to ask questions. If you're not asking questions, you're not learning. You can't learn more about Islam without asking questions. But if asking questions, here's the thing I like about how he went towards the end. If you're asking questions and you find reasons to not believe, then you're supposed to, if you don't believe, see, they scare you into not leaving them publicly, because they're going to kill you if they catch you. Keep thinking about this. I'm going to go back here for a bit. These verses in this in Sharia, they're problematic as a whole. They have to make you think, what's happening when we don't question things? This goes on, and this is the reason why I keep thinking you have to ask questions. All right. It says, as for the evidentiary character of texts, regardless of whether they are unquestionably or probabilistically established transmission, they are of two types. Now, Eric, what you missed, I just want to point it out. I'm going to go back there just so you can see it. I think you'll be surprised. We just covered this part. And what I pointed out, and we're going to go back to that in just a second, B6.1 says, and this is with using the critical thinking skills that we have as educators, we have as human beings. It talks about they've arrived at the rulings of sacred law through evidence that is either unquestionably established transmission or probabilistically established transmission. And then they go straight into the surahs of the Quran in all of its verses. This means that oral tradition is how the Quran was handed down. It wasn't written down until how much later? I mean, they talk about unquestionably established transmission, probabilistically. Why did they I mean, I would expect that to be talked about with the Hadith. I would not expect that with the Quran when you're going to put it into law. But we do know that the people who had the surahs in their head, I mean, supposedly they wrote them down. And that's what created, or had someone write them down for them. And that's what again, that's where we start to run into trouble. See, if the original person who was there, who memorizes it, gets it written down, and we're starting to get into some serious questions about the Quran, about its very existence as being anything. Oops, sorry. All right, here we go. So going on, that's why I put that video in the middle. Let's get into this again. He's talking about unquestionable. So you don't have a choice whether to believe or not. As evidence is plain text that does not admit of more than one meaning, which no mind can interpret beyond its one meaning. So keep thinking about this. You can't question. There's only one meaning. Now, when we've read the Quran, if you've read it with us, go through the Dissecting the Quran series, you'll find some interesting things. One of the things, if you've actually read the Quran, you notice that it's lacking in details. You also notice that if you compare stories like the story of Moses or anybody, any stories in the Bible, you can patch up. I mean, all these stories next to each other, and they're not consistent. But according to this, you can't question the meaning. Can you question the authenticity when it looks like someone has lied and forgot the lie and told another lie and then told another lie and then told another lie because they can't remember what they said the first time? Unquestionable evidence. Looks like the evidence is questioning itself to me. But don't question that. The evidence is there. Maybe that's what we should say. It's unquestionable evidence that the Quran is filled with con man language. It's filled with lies and deceit. That's unquestionable evidence. I can give them that part. It's in there when you read the Quran. One of the things I will never forget, the thing that has me probably surprised the most, is how the Quran has it has evidence over and over and over and over again that it was written by someone who did not know Arabic as their first language. Yet their claim in, Arab people who are Muslim and Arabs believe they have superiority in Islam. But the author of the Quran, the person who wrote the Quran, did not know Arabic as their first language. This is where I think is fascinating. All right, let's get back into this. We're talking about unquestionable evidence. And it's you can't interpret things behind the Quran beyond its one meaning, which there's no possibility to construe in terms of other than its apparent sense. When you use con man language which is in the Quran, you don't use details. The purpose is so you can take with con man language is you get someone doing a fortune telling or something, and they're trying to con you. They'll say like, "Oh, you're gonna meet a handsome guy, or you're gonna meet a beautiful woman," blah blah blah. They give you these stories. So you walk down the street, you see a pretty girl. Okay, It's con man language. They didn't tell you anything specific. They didn't say she's going to have black hair. They didn't say she's going to have blonde hair. She's going to have all these, he's going to have all these things. They didn't give you any details. They just gave you generalities. And that is a problem. Why? Because it says something about the person who did the writing. He didn't know. He made stuff up on the fly, and he was trying to con you. So how can you only have that one meaning? And if you ever read Ibn Kathir's stuff, you know that this is mess. They must not have liked Ibn Kathir, but yet they consider him a scholar. So I don't know what they're doing here. This type of Quranic verses that deal with the fundamental tenets of faith in the oneness of Allah, the prayer, the zakat, and fasting. Okay. Just to let everybody know who doesn't know, Ramadan we are at that point of Ramadan. We're back into Ramadan Bamathon, and this is the time where they skip lunch. There is no fasting. Okay. Be careful during Ramadan Bamathon, because that's when the jihadis go wild. And it's their claims, their scriptures that endorse it. Zakat. What do they got to give? 12.5%. Every Muslim who pays zakat must give, it's required, 12.5% to jihad. It is required. It's in Shariah. If you want more on that, look up Ramadan, zakat, and jihad. It's a past video that I've done. It'll blow your mind. Let's keep going. In none of which is there any room for disagreement, nor have any differences concerning them been heard or reported from the imams of sacred law. Everything in this category is termed unquestionable as evidence. Well, here's my problem with the oneness of Allah. When you read the Quran and you look at Allah, and you look at the characteristics of Allah, and you look at the characteristics of Satan, why is it that Allah has the same characteristics as Satan in the Quran? Can someone explain that to me? Okay. We're talking about the oneness. I mean, again, there are other we're talking about their God Allah refers to himself as an us and a we. Where's the oneness there? Please go ahead, Sharon.
Oh, well, I always say it is Satan because of the attributes. And then it's also called itself Lord of the World several times. And that's one of Satan's titles from the Bible.
Yes.
And I always call it an it. Oh, Allah in it.
And I find that humorous because I don't think Allah. I mean, I would say Allah has male attributes because he's always concerned about having sex. I think he's more of a sock puppet and asexual because I don't think he can produce without help. But yeah.
Technically, I think it's really Muhammad.
Oh yeah.
But I usually go with what they believe. Try to get into their mindset. But yeah, I agree with you totally.
I mean, they're saying these things are unquestionable. I say the word fasting is questionable. When you only skip lunch and you have a feast in the morning and you have a wild feast at night and you stuff yourself so you can't eat anymore and you try to survive during the daytime and you're all irritable because you have to do this. Start reading Shariah, people. Muslims, I encourage you to read Shariah to see how many outs you can find on not obeying these rules. You'll probably find an out. Read the Shariah. This is a very valuable thing. All right. Next, we're up to the second type, probabilistic as evidence. It's a text that can bear more than one meaning, whether because it contains a word that can lexically have two different meanings. Yeah. This is where it gets humorous. Notice this part. It can lexically have two different meanings. Now, if you have paid attention to the work that's being done, where there's 37 or 38, I can't remember, 37, 38, different Qurans we're talking about today. And in Arabic, the original Quran had no vowels. And you can't find a Muslim who is willing to translate Arabic without the dots. You can't. You can't find with the vowel notes. You can't find one Muslim who's willing to translate that. Why is that? Well, because of this. See, if you put in the vowels, they have different words. It's not just two different meanings. They are two different words. And it's in Shariah here. Well, it could be different. Yeah, there's a whole bunch. Hatun could really do a lot of. I suggest you go and look at Hatun's work. You'll see a lot of this there. And it goes on and it says, could be a figure of speech. It could be a metaphor. Can be interpreted other than the apparent sense and the context without contradicting what was intended by the wise lawgiver. Do you remember who the wise lawgiver was? Does anybody remember that? According to the Quran, you would think they're talking about Allah, right? That's not true. According to Reliance the Traveler, the Shariah, it's Allah or his messenger. So are we talking about Allah or are we talking about Muhammad? Or are we talking about them both? Which would make Allah the sock puppet. Keep thinking about it. It is here we find scope for scholarly difference of opinion to greater or lesser extent, depending on the number of meanings a text can imply, how much interpretation it'll bear, and so forth. Keep remembering, I was talking about con man language. These lack of, there's generalities, there's lack of details. So if you go and you want to have a good laugh, read a passage in the Quran. Then go find out Ibn Kathir's commentary on it. You would think, we're going through this right now with Usama Dakdak's show. And in his show, they're going through Moses and talking about, we were just talking about the temple. And Ibn Kathir just makes up all this crap like he was actually there when God was talking to Moses. He just makes up stuff. It's not in the Quran. So you have to sit there and ask, was Ibn Kathir there? Does he know more than Muhammad, who was there? But, yeah. Interpretation. Yeah. It says all of the derivative rulings of the sacred law of this type are probabilistic as evidence, so we naturally find differences among Islamic legal scholars to their interpretation. Again, you can't accept stuff as answers if the legal scholars don't accept it. And when they're in consensus, where the legal scholars agree, this is the problem I have. If legal scholars agree, you're not allowed to use your brain and say, uh-oh, that does not sound right. Yes, where they say, open it up and take out the brain. All right. We're down to the last piece we're going to cover today. This is not the last slide, though. B6.2, it says, we conclude this short summary with an example to clarify what we have said. Consider the word of Allah. Now we're going to come back and we're going to take a look at what those verses actually say in correctly translated in a bit. But let's go through this verse. It says, divorced women shall wait by themselves for 3 periods. What is wrong with the order of these 2 verses? Can someone tell me? It's really simple. Which verse should be first? Let me just ask that. Shouldn't it be the verse 226? Chronologically, you would think that comes first. So why do they cite verse 228 first? I mean, you have to, what's the importance of doing that? You're not going to find out until we look at the translation. So, divorced women shall wait by themselves for 3 periods. As opposed to his saying in the same surah, those who forswear their women have to wait 4 months. I'm going to leave that there and just think about, I mean, that's the translation they're giving. It's a nasty, dirty passage, is what I'm going to tell you. But we're going to keep going. Allah is saying 3 in the former and 4 in the latter. In the former and 4 in the latter. Wait a minute. Catch that. Allah is saying 3 in the former. Okay. Divorced women shall wait by themselves for 3 periods. But the verses are reversed. Are they too stupid to realize that, or are they trying to deceive us? See, it says three months for divorced women. Here's the catch. Now pay attention here. There's something in these 2 verses you should be catching. Start asking yourself questions. Start forming them. Because when I show you the translation, you're going to say, I saw that. So why are they lying to us here in saying 3 in the former and 4 in the latter? I mean, I looked at this and I looked at this and I looked at this, and I went back and I got Usama's translation. And I sat there like, to me, I'm looking at this. Why are they're even lying to themselves? Because this is Muslims lying to other Muslims. What's the purpose? Protect Islam. The funny thing is they don't need to do it for this passage. But these people who wrote this passage didn't have the ability to use critical thinking to find their way out. Because they don't ask questions, they couldn't find their way out. And I'll show you that in a bit. There was an easy way to take this without making up this gobbledygook. But in contrast with this, when Allah says periods in the first and months in the second, we find that the former words can have more one sense in Arabic. They're talking about, okay, it could be months. The other one could be talking about meaning is incapable of bearing one to interpret concerning the question. Imam Qurtubi says in his Quranic exegesis, scholars differ about the word periods. Really? Those of Kufa hold that it means menstrual periods, and this is the position of Umar ibn Masud. But those that hold it means the intervals of purity between the periods. Really, was that the major concern? I mean, I got to sit here and laugh when I'm looking at this. All right, so let's take a look at those verses in the correct translation. 226. I put them in the correct order. To those who desire divorce from their women, let them stop having sex with them for 4 months. So if they get back together, pay real close attention. This is why they're playing with a 4 and the 3, and you'll see it quickly. 227. And if they decide on divorce, see, they left that out. So the man who's going to have a divorce has to stop having sex with his woman for 4 months. Then, I'm just following through. This is critical thinking. Then if they decide on divorce, the woman has to keep from themselves for 3 months. She's not allowed to marry somebody for another. That's 7 months, people. 4 months where the husband says, no, we're not going to do this. And then another 3 months. So there's 3 and 4 that they've been lying to you even in the reliance of the traveler. We're talking about Shariah. That's 4 months the man has to stop touching his wife. And then it's another 3 months the woman's on her own. Let's take a look what verse 228 says to back this up. And the divorced woman should keep themselves from having sex with their husbands for three menstruations. It is not lawful for them to hide what Allah has created in their wombs if they were. But the divorced woman, she's away from her husband. She hasn't had sex with him for 4 months, according to this passage. And now she has to wait another 3 months before she can even be interested in another guy. I'm not saying that she should just be running out there and trying to find another man. But during this time period, to be alone meant she probably didn't have any income. She didn't have a way of providing for herself and her children, except for her immediate family. And sometimes they weren't willing to take you in, especially for divorce. It's inhumanely cruel, is what I'm going to say. 7 months. Anybody else have thoughts on this? Wow. Thought somebody would. All
I
right.
can't imagine.
Oh, my mic isn't working right.
Okay. I hope Darcy, can you have a comment on this? All right.
No, my
Go
mic
ahead, sir.
isn't working right.
Okay. We can hear you. You're doing fine. I'm just amazed. Sharon, go ahead if you had a comment, please.
Oh, it's just I can't imagine what life would be like since I lived like a completely opposite type of life. You know, I just can't imagine.
I mean, I guess do you see do you see 7 months here as I do? I want to make sure somebody else sees it, because I mean, maybe I'm imagining things, but I see 7 months there, because the first verse talks about the woman is still in the home.
Well,
no, sorry. Go ahead, Sharon. Sorry.
Oh, it's just her and her kids would starve. Oh,
Yeah.
but no, wait a minute. The man owns the kids.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, so the kids probably wouldn't starve. She would. And she'd be
Yes.
out in the streets, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so she's in the house for 4 months. All right. They get the divorce. Now she's on the street for 3 months and she can't be around another man.
she would starve.
Yeah. But I mean, do you think he's actually providing for her correctly in those last 4 months is my other question. I mean, that would be, for me, I just don't see that being done correctly, but
I don't know. I see it a different way entirely.
okay.
Say those who forswear their women, that to me is talking about men who forswear their women. They have to wait 4 months.
Yes, that's what I'm getting at. The man has to wait 4 months.
But the
Yes.
divorced women have to wait by themselves.
That's the woman who's already out of the house.
Right,
That's
but that shows the hypocrisy, the preferential treatment towards men.
Yes. Well,
You know.
and this again, the purpose is to supposedly that she won't hide that she has a child. But again, he's already had to be celibate from her. Not celibate, really, because he's could have, how many other wives and countless other sex slaves. For this one woman, he's had to be celibate from her for 4 months. He kicks her out of the house on 227 and divorces her. And she's on the street and she's not allowed to be around another man for 3 menstruations. And during this time period, this was dangerous. So this reveals that this passage is hooey. Okay. So this reveals, Shariah has just got caught in a lie. They're talking about a supposed thing with 3 and 4 when it's actually 7. I mean, think about that. If you read the passage and you translate it correctly, we get 7 months. And this is, I had to reread this four or 5 times to double check. Wait a minute. Okay. To those who desire to divorce from their women, it's only the desire. She doesn't even have to know. Is he even talking to her about divorce at this point? No, he's just cut her off from having sex. So, Muslim women, if you're out there, your husband has stopped having sex with you, according to the Quran, he's probably going to divorce you. Scary. Yeah, I'd be concerned. I'd seek some help if I were you. I don't know what to recommend from that. You know, when I went through this, I spent a lot of time thinking, asking questions. And I don't think we can survive without asking questions. When I do the daily devotional piece that I write, I can't survive without asking questions about what I'm reading. What does it say if you're a follower of any faith and you must accept without question somebody's words about that faith? I mean, I think it's really cool that we're even allowed to question God in the Judeo-Christian faith. I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to sit there and call him a liar. You're not going to, but even our God, he's okay with you yelling and screaming at him as long as you maintain a relationship with him. Your job is to maintain a relationship with God. That's how I look at that. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is where things get cool. I mean, the Christian God just wants to have that conversation with you. The Islam's God doesn't want the conversation. All he wants is absolute obedience. Which one's worthy of worship? Let's put it that way. Someone that says, obey me no matter what. Oh, and if you leave. The other one says, I love you. I did this for you. And he offers you a free gift. Is he telling you, you must believe, you must accept, you must do this, you must do that? No. In fact, he's got that gift out there, sitting there. He's offering it to you, and it's your choice whether you take it. He's not forcing you to take anything. In Islam, and this happens every day, it's been happening for 1,400 years. I wish it wasn't true. A Muslim will come up to someone and say, convert, or now is this happening in your country? I don't know. I will say that we have evidence every day coming in, and I do recommend going to a place to find it called The Religion of Peace. Go look it up on the web. It happens. They're being asked to convert or die. It's The Religion of Peace. Now, we're going to start having the Ramadan report attacks pretty soon. But let's just talk about one of these. I'm just going to pick the one that I did not earlier. So this is from just 3 days ago. Comes from Barron's. I'm going to put this link in the chat room. You have no choice. I mean, can you imagine having no choice and being told convert or die? And I'll put it in private chat for everybody else too. Oops. And I'm going to put this out one more time because I didn't put it out to all the destinations. All right. Okay. And brand. Sorry, private chat. If you in here want to look, suspected jihadis kill 11 in Burkina Faso. 5 women, a man, and 5 army volunteers have died in a series of attacks in eastern Burkina Faso over the last 2 days, a local security source said. The woman died on Monday when the booby-trapped body of a young man was killed. The day before exploded in central eastern Burkina, where jihadi attacks are frequent. The young man and 3 friends had been intercepted by armed terrorists. 3 managed to escape, but unfortunately the 4th was killed. On Monday morning, village men set off to bury the man only for his body to explode. This is happening too often. I'm always reading of forced conversions. You find this every day it's in the news. Our news sources here hide these things. You hear about forced marriages in Pakistan. It's every day. In fact, it's so common over there, they don't put it in the news every day because it's a normal story. It's an everyday thing. Forced, I mean, you could type it in, forced marriage, and you can go to news, and I'm just going to do that right now. And it's like the first thing that comes up. They usually hide it. Okay, here's one from 3 days ago in Nigeria, forced marriage. And I'll put this up on the screen just a minute. Come on. And my computer is looping. And let's see, here we go. We're getting there. It's hidden. Crap. Oh, here we go. I'm going to put that up on the screen now. I mean, think about this. They get forced to convert, and so they can get married and become little producers of more Islam. Forced marriage in Nigeria. This is from this day. The article by Success Ojasa discusses forced and arranged marriages, explaining the difference between the two types of marriage, consent being a major distinguishing factor while not approving of either type of marriage. What do you mean, not approving? So let's go down here to what is forced marriage. This is a situation where one is pressured into a marriage absent of free will. It is a situation where when one consents to a marriage that they will not have consented to. It is, think about this wording here. It's just a bad article to begin with, and I apologize for that. I'm reading these every day. This is not one of the ones out of Pakistan. This is from Nigeria. Every day you get these articles, if you pay attention. There's every single day. Oh, here's the new boom one. I didn't catch this one. All right. Yeah. Wow, that's the last one from last year. Wow. All right. So Sharon gave me something to share. Wow. So Ramadan 2022. Let me pull that up. Again, this is not going to be a good year, I don't believe, for Ramadan. I don't think it's going to be something anybody will be happy to see. I think it's going to be an especially hard time. The last year, in 2022, there were 177 attacks, 1,086 people killed. And no one suffers more than other Muslims during the month of Ramadan. Again, if you can't question Islam, you can't find out if what it's saying has error. And Eric, I've been thinking about you a lot this week because when I was reading this stuff and I was talking about it keeps saying the parts that we're reading, we're talking about transmission, and I sat there thinking of how all the things that you've done to expose, like, okay, Jerusalem was there, but Mecca wasn't. All these little things that you've done about the Qurans and all the little pieces that you put together. I have to sit there and look, and think about it afterwards. And I see all these questions that they have put in. They're giving us reasons to ask questions in Sharia. They're giving us reasons to question if the scriptures are actually close to accurate.
Well, you don't have free will if you cannot question your religion, or you cannot question the authorities that are in charge of your religion. And this is one of the one of the biggest faults that you find in Islam. When you start looking at the backwardnesses of cultures. This is what cultural decay looks like, or the non-advancement of a culture when you cannot have free inquiry, and then you codify it into the Sharia because you cannot. What does the Sharia say? It says that you cannot question any passage of the Quran where the consensus of which is the consensus of the scholars.
Yeah.
Or something along the Muhammad. I'd have to read it, but the fact is that when you can't question that, your learning dies. I mean, that's just a natural that's just a natural law of consequences that happens. If you can't question, then you cannot advance in society. You can't advance in science. You can't advance culturally, and you're going to be stuck in the 7th century.
Reason why, as a whole, that you cannot. I mean, they had to create something which was recently created in the past. Since the 60s, I should say.
Hold on, Paul, just a second. Somebody just rang the doorbell. Hold on. Oh, yeah. Never mind. Hold on.
Yeah, you can't create. We had this created here. It was created here, pretty much in the United States and Canada and in England, where they have this thing called the Islamization of knowledge. Islamization of knowledge has to do with you can't accept anything new unless it goes through the rose-colored glasses of Islam. Okay, rose-colored glasses say, okay, if it's acceptable to Islam, it goes through this test and some modification. Now we can accept it. When any kind of faith structure does that, they claim to have authority over everything. That's problematic. I don't know anyone or anything besides God that knows everything. God's the only one that I can trust that has that kind of knowledge. It's scary to think. I got to turn off my sound. Apparently, I didn't do that, which I normally do. I figure the one thing that if you run a test, you can run a test on people who have a high school diploma, and you give them a sheet of paper, and you ask them to draw a circle of their knowledge, and the rest of the paper is all knowledge. All right? Draw a circle in that of your knowledge. You go to the person who has the bachelor's degree, give a whole bunch of them the same thing. A piece of paper, the paper represents all knowledge. You draw a circle of your knowledge in there. You go to the person with the master's degrees, okay? Grab a whole bunch of them. You can have masters in science and nursing. You can find them with MAs. You can find them MB, masters in business administration. Get them, same thing, paper, and have them. The paper represent all knowledge, and them draw a circle in there of your knowledge. You go to the PhDs, do the same thing. Here's what they have discovered. This has been done, and it's as a psychological test. And this one makes me laugh every time I've heard it. And I've heard this story since the 80s because that's my, actually it's farther back than that, but yeah, 80s is where I started hearing this. It was, so the high school kids had a good sized picture. They had the biggest circles, all of them. All the people with the high school diplomas, that's all they had. They had the biggest circles. Guess who had the smallest ones? See, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. This is the purpose of critical thinking. You have to find out. This is why you ask questions, because you realize we are simple people. If we don't ask questions, we don't know. We can't learn what we don't know, because that means we can't learn more. So we remain stupid or ignorant. Most human beings want to know more. They want to understand. There's a drive within them. And yes, Larry, Cross and Crescent should be on this Sunday. I almost wasn't on today. Did not expect that part. Okay. We have to start thinking about what is going on with our faith structures. If you have a faith structure that says you can't ask questions, I don't care what you're in. If you're in a church, you're in a synagogue, you're in a sect, a group, whatever, or wherever. Once they tell you to stop asking questions, run. Get out of there. Why? There are many questions that need to be asked. And when somebody tells you stop asking questions, so you do that to me. I'm a research writer. This actually happened to me, and this is the reason I do what I do now. I found the Muslim Brotherhood at Nazareth College of Rochester. I asked questions, and I got blacklisted by Nazareth College for asking questions about, taking someone, I made an accusation, that they were accepting funds from a parent of Al Qaeda. Yeah, the Muslim Brotherhood. They accepted $500,000 from a group called the International Institute of Islamic Thought, which is part of the Muslim Brotherhood in North America. It's actually written into a document. And where's the value in taking money from the parents of someone who attacked us? Well, they ended up hiring they paid for $500,000 that paid for an Islamic chair at Nazareth College. You hear the word Nazareth College and you don't think there's going to be an Islamic chair. You think it's going to be a Christian or a Catholic school. Well, it's neither now. But there is an Islamic chair. There's an Islamic chair. Think about that. What's going on when you're not allowed to ask questions? You go to you go to any Christian school. I had one professor in the theology class who got upset because I questioned one of his conclusions. And I told him he was wrong. And he said, okay, you have to come in and prove that you're right. And if you don't, you are going to fail my class. You might as well not come again. I got the biggest grin on my face. Here's what happened. I grinned and grinned and grinned. And the next day, class, I stood in front of his class. I handed out papers that proved he was wrong in his conclusion. I handed it out to everybody. And they're looking at it. They're reading it. Sutliff is right. Brown was wrong. Oh my gosh. And this guy had cited about how many academic credentials he has. Okay, I didn't have my master's. I had my bachelor's and I had a brain. Okay. I had my critical thinking. My critical thinking skills are far refined now, having done master's work, having done some PhD work. I look at this, how can you tell someone to stop asking? He got mad because I questioned his conclusions. And then I was able to establish to everybody in the class. So here's what he did when I gave it to him, the handout to him. He looked at it and would not make another comment about the issue. Everybody in the class got mad. They're insisting I make him apologize because he threatened me and he told me I was an idiot, basically, in front of everybody. I just walked out I told everybody with a big grin on my face, did I prove myself correct? Do I need him to apologize to admit that? I said, no. Yep, he knew he was busted. And I sat there kind of laughing to myself afterwards. I didn't need him to apologize. I didn't need him to admit he was wrong. He knew he was wrong. I swore that's what happened in the beginning of the discussion. I was basically accusing him of purposely misinforming the public. When I handed out those sheets, he knew he was done. So I think he pretty much knew that. Well, that was back in the 90s, and he has probably since went to be hopefully with the Lord. But you sit there, you learn these things, and it's all from asking questions. When people want you to stop, this is where, again, you have to pay attention to Scripture. This is why you want to ask questions of Scripture, so you learn more. If I didn't do that, I couldn't write the devotionals I write. If I didn't do that, I couldn't do the jobs I do. I do more than just write books on devotionals. I do more. I do a lot of different things. And I'm only good at any of them because I ask questions. When I do work with students, I just go back to that phrase. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Because if one of you is asking a question, chances are there's 5 others asking the same exact question. Now, here's the real thing and remember that countdown. He's talking about apostasy. They all agree that Islam would be dead if they didn't threaten to kill you if you leave. Keep thinking. Are they going to kill you for asking questions, or are they going to kill you for using your brain? Be concerned, people. Somebody wants to shut you down. They don't want you to think for yourself. That's not a godly group. In fact, they have nothing to do with the living God. They have everything to do with the opposing party, Satan. Those people who want to control what you say, control what you think, they have more to do with Satan than anything else. Now, with that said, I'm going to share one last thing and then probably just going to close out. I went to a medical facility today, so I had to wear a mask. And every time I do go to there, I'm in Libland, New York, they still have rules. You have to wear a mask in the medical facility. You don't have to wear one when you go shopping. You don't have to wear one when you're outside. You don't have to wear one when you're in an Uber, a bus, or on a plane. But when you go to a medical facility, you have to wear a mask. The medical professional I saw was wearing 2 of them. I says, when are you guys going to start practicing science? I mean, you're supposed to know more than I do about science. I've read the medical studies on how stupid cloth masks are. Says, well, yours is cloth. I says, no, ma'am. Your masks are considered cloth as well. These are surgical masks. Yes, they're made of cloth. She didn't know. Of course, this same person had swallowed she was saying all these things about the COVID jab being good. She's calling it a vaccination. I could have informed her. Look, you do know. I mean, I did ask her, have you read the VAERS data? No. You're sure it's good, but you've never read the VAERS data. Okay. Well, I've read the studies. Really? Did you know it increases myocarditis? And did you? I mean, I could go on and on with all the stuff I've read on this. Basically, that person had stopped asking questions as far as COVID. She's just accepting what people don't accept anything I have told you today. That's what I'm going to tell you. Don't accept any of it. Go check it out for yourself. Find out if I have told you the truth or not. And now that's what it comes down to. Am I telling you the truth or am I telling you a lie? Don't accept it. Go find out for yourself. And anybody else have any comments? I'm going to close out.
Looks like I made it just in time again. I'm sorry, Paul. I've had a busy
That's all right.
man.
Life
really
happens. Life happens. Darcy, I know your tablet's out, but what Darcy would tell you today is use your brain. Go ahead, Sharon.
Thank you. And I'm going to admit today's was a confusing one because some of that stuff that you had up there, I had to read a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what it did to me. And exactly, I'm that's why, I mean, some of their words were so jumped together. I mean, the whole line all the way across was like one word.
Yeah. It's
So I didn't, I personally, I look at that and I'm like, wait a minute, that just, yeah. I went through these 3 or 4. This is why this today's was kind of short. Something is wrong, is when it comes down to all of this has to do with you really can't ask questions, and I cannot grasp living in a world where you can't.
Well, look at what their world has put out. Not much, except violence, a lot of deformed kids, a lot of kids, and not much else. If they didn't discover oil that we helped them take out of the ground, they wouldn't have a lot of money either.
That's pretty much it. I would like to see what would happen if Iran, Iraq, all these Islamic countries, 53 is these 50 some Islamic countries, at 57 it might be, Islamic nations had no outside financing and we didn't buy their products. How would they survive? Would they go back to the 7th century and try to live like that again? Or would they be struggling?
Struggling.
Yeah. It's crazy. God bless everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And